You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 591, Workforce.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we take on the job of podcast hosts, dedicated solely to the task of examining an episode of Star Trek and looking for the morals, meanings, and messages, and asking ourselves if it stands the test of time.
This week, Workforce, along with Workforce Part 2, the one where Janeway and company get new jobs, along with new apartments and new personal lives. All in all, a pretty good deal, except for the feigned excitement over thermocouplers. Also, the mind extraction. That part is bad, too.
I'll be right back with trivia, but first, here's Norm with all the details on how to reach us.
We would love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now, here's John Champion with this week's work rotation.
All right. Well, a couple of big episodes here, so we'll get right through this. For the writing of these two episodes, it's all staff names that you know and love. So part 1 has a written by credit of Ken Biller and Brian Fuller, and that is the only written credit. So we don't have a separate story and teleplay credit. Roll around to part 2. Story credit by Ken Biller and Brian Fuller again, but the teleplay credit goes to Ken Biller and Michael Taylor. So that's the only additional name that gets thrown into the work rotation. Part 1 was directed by Alan Croker, and we just recently discussed his work for Inside Man, but Part 2 was directed by Roxanne Dawson. And keep in mind that this is Roxanne's second ever directing credit and her final directing credit for Star Trek Voyager. Her first credit was last season when she directed Riddles. Now, of course, Roxanne has gone on to have quite a successful career as a director, and we will catch her yet again for more Star Trek. Now, this episode was nominated for Emmy Awards for music and special visual effects. That would be for part 1. And in fact, it lost in both categories. But wait. That's okay, because it lost to Voyager. But that's for an episode that we haven't gotten to cover yet, so stay tuned. Now, guest stars. There are quite a few spread out over this two-parter, so we're just going to focus on some of the key players here. Umali is the owner of the bar where Tom takes a job, and she is played by Iona Morris. And believe it or not, we have seen Iona before. Let me take you all the way back to 1966 for the TOS episode Miri, in which she was one of the children. Now, she hasn't stopped working ever since and has amassed a huge resume of on-camera roles, as well as a very impressive catalog of voice acting gigs, one of my favorites being Storm from the X-Men animated series. She also happens to be the daughter of Mission Impossible co-star Greg Morris, and that makes her the sister of Voyager guest star Phil Morris.
Just an aside, John, do you think it, speculation-wise, because Mission Impossible and Star Trek were both produced by Desilu
and filmed right next door to each other. Yeah.
Then, she could have been with, her father, on set and said, hey, we need some children, to do this episode. Do you think that Molly will be, I'd like to be a background character?
That would not surprise me at all. If you're on the lot, then, hey, we'll put you to work. Now, the captain of the Quarren Coyote, a.k.a. smuggler ship, is played by Michael Behrens, and this episode of Voyager is actually the final of 4 on-screen credits that he has as an actor. Some years later, Michael switched his focus to producing and worked on a handful of features and shorts, and after that, his focus turned to teaching, and later he worked in financial operations for the San Francisco State University. John Aniston is the ever-so-helpful Quarren ambassador. John was born in Greece, and his on-screen career stretches all the way back to the early 1960s with series work and appearances on Playhouse shows. He made just about every stop in every genre, and he appeared in Mad Men, The West Wing, and Cold Case in later years. Undoubtedly, he is best known for his astonishing 2,761 appearances on the long-running daytime soap Days of Our Lives, where he first appeared in 1970 as Dr. Eric Richards, and then in 1985 rejoined the show as Victor Kiriakis, a role he played until his death in 2022. Dr. Ravik is played by Jay Harrington, pretty early in his career here, but he shot to number 1 on the call sheet relatively soon after in the title role of the short-lived comedy series Better Off Ted. Fast forward a few more years, and he's got another co-star role in the CBS series SWAT. So far, this is Jay's only Trek appearance. Investigator Yared is played by Canadian-born Robert Joy. He got his start on screen in the early 70s, and he racked up a fair number of feature films along with consistent TV work. He appeared in Ragtime, Radio Days, the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, and he even plays Dr. Hawking in the parody Superhero Movie. He was the titular character in the TV film of one of my favorite plays, The Nerd, and he keeps on working to this day. Now, the one who takes a special interest in Janeway is Jaffin. He's played by James Reed, and he came to TV and film with a long background in live theater, and he had early recurring roles in series like Remington Steele, and a major role as George Hazard in the miniseries North and South. Most recently, you may have caught him as Captain Seals in Bosch, or in another long recurring gig on, yes, one more time, Days of Our Lives. And finally, Don Most plays Caden, and while you primarily think of Don as Moloch on the Run Devil Run episode of Chips, don't forget that he also appeared twice on Fantasy Island and 7 times on The Love Boat. That puts him firmly in Bert Convy / David Hedison territory, just a step ahead of Barbie Benton and just a step behind Judy Landers. No small feat there. All right, but who are we kidding? Don is known as Ralph Mouth from the long-running hit Happy Days. And don't forget the animated time travel spinoff, The Fonz, and the Happy Days gang. Don continues to work constantly in guest TV and feature film roles. To this date, this is his only Trek appearance.
If I may, I would be remiss. I am so sorry to break in again. I have to mention that he was the voice of Eric, the very whiny, very moody, very bitter, caustic cavalier that wore the shield in the animated Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And look, I lied because not finally. We actually have our real finally now. The supervisor at the Quarren power plant is played by Tom Virtue. And if he looks a little familiar, that's because he is the actor who played Baxter in seasons 1 and 2. And I guess he was working out so hard that he didn't notice when the Voyager crew was brainwashed and put to work on an alien planet.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Who's got time for phasers or warp drive anymore? Now we're just punching the clock.
Prologue. Just another day at the giant power plant on an alien world. It's all hard hats and hazard lights as Captain Janeway checks in at her new job. She's got all the cred and the thermodynamics know-how to impress her new boss. Sure, she got a little lost on the way to work, but no matter. The reactor coils aren't going to manage themselves, and this place prides itself on keeping the workforce happy. Sounds like an upgrade from her last gig, whatever that was. Act 1. Janeway's hard at work on something, but the computer says no. A nearby technician steps in to override the system and prevent a meltdown. Meet Jaffin, friendly, casual, just a guy with good timing and an appreciation for Janeway's quirky charm. Their chat is cut short by a very serious woman with a clipboard and zero tolerance for banter. She introduces herself as Annika Hansen, efficiency monitor, policy enforcer, buzzkill. Jaffin returns to work, but not before inviting Janeway out for a drink. She declines. She's got manuals to study. Elsewhere, Tom Paris is trying to land a gig at a local bar, chatting up the manager. He's got the charm, but not much of a resume. Only lasted a few hours at the power plant. Something about a disagreement with the new efficiency monitor. Still, the bar needs help, and Tom's got that roguish energy that says, "I'm bad at office jobs." So he's hired. That night, Jaffin's holding court with some of the other plant workers, cracking jokes, and Tuvok, yes, Tuvok, is laughing along until he overanalyzes the punchline. Jokes are always funnier when you have to explain them. Janeway shows up at the bar purely to catch up on work, and Jaffin saunters over. They walk home together, and she tells him about her homeworld, Earth, a polluted, overworked planet. Jaffin offers to keep the night going, but she declines. Technical manuals await. Back at work the next day, an alarm sounds again. Janeway checks her console, but it's nothing urgent. Just time for mandatory radiation inoculations. Jaffin shrugs it off. Janeway doesn't question it. But when it's Tuvok's turn, he recoils. He's terrified and has a flashback. Guards, restraints, and another injection. He shakes it off and returns to work. But something isn't right. Act 2. Chakotay, Harry, and Neelix are in the Delta Flyer on their way back from a trading mission, but Harry's a little worse for wear with a stomach ache from something he drank. Chakotay would prefer everyone focus on the bigger issue. They've reached Voyager's rendezvous point, but there's no ship and no response on any channel. When they do find Voyager, it's inside a nebula, and the Doctor is activated as the ECH. He's flying solo, and he's got quite the story to tell. After Voyager struck a subspace mine, that kicked off a cascade of systems failures. When environmental controls went down, he moved his program to the mobile emitter just in time to watch the ship flood with dangerous radiation. Janeway ordered everyone to evacuate while he stayed behind to try to save the ship. Just before leaving, she activated the emergency command hologram protocols and transferred all command codes to him. Then came the aliens. They didn't detect life signs on Voyager, but they weren't convinced. When they locked a tractor beam on Voyager, the Doctor fought back, crippling their engines and narrowly escaping into the nebula where he could finally vent the radiation and hide out. He finishes the story for Chakotay and Harry with his revelation that the mine and the ambush were part of the same trap, and the rest of the crew are still missing. Act 3. Tuvok watches Janeway from across the work floor while wrestling with a fragment of his memory. In his mind, he's back in a Quarren hospital, restrained, while Dr. Caton prepares to operate on Janeway. Tuvok questions him, but the explanation is thin. She's being treated for dysphoria syndrome, supposedly a common condition. The doctor sedates Tuvok before he can protest further. In the present, Tuvok approaches Janeway and tells her that they've met before, not a week ago at a work briefing, but in a hospital. She's polite but dismissive, assuming he's confused. Jaffin interrupts and Tuvok backs off. Then Jaffin asks Janeway to dinner again, and she agrees, but only if she gets to cook. At the bar, Tom is chatting up a new customer, B'Elanna. He tries some charm and invites her for a riverside walk. That's when B'Elanna stands up, revealing that she's visibly pregnant. Still want to go out? Tom asks if she's married. She's not, and with that, she leaves him speechless. Back on Voyager, the crew of 4 are doing the best they can. The Doctor has patched together secondary propulsion, but there's still no sign of the rest of the crew. Harry's also still recovering from that alien beverage, and the Doctor's bedside manner is starting to wear thin. Chakotay thanks the Doctor for fixing the ship and asks him to tackle a few more repairs, but the ECH bristles. He's in command now, and command belongs on the bridge, not crawling through plasma relays. Chakotay gently reminds him that they're short-handed, and just then Harry interrupts. He's found an M-class planet where the crew may be located, only 3 days away at maximum warp. Down on Quora, Janeway has attempted to cook, which mostly means scraping burnt bits off the food. Dinner's a bust, but the chemistry is not. Neither of them is particularly hungry, and the rest of the evening begins with a kiss. Act 4. Voyager arrives at Quora, and Chakotay's diplomatic strategy hits a wall. The ambassador says, yes, Voyager's crew are here, working, happy, and claiming that they've never heard of him. Chakotay asks to speak to them directly, but no dice. Workers' rights are protected, and they're not about to let some random former employer come poaching talent. Chakotay orders Voyager to leave orbit just enough to make it look like they've given up. They won't leave the crew behind, but the Quarren don't need to know that. Back on Quora, relationships are starting to bloom. Janeway and Jaffin are inching closer, and B'Elanna and Tom are bonding, though she makes it clear that there's no romance on the horizon. She's pregnant, single, and mostly just appreciates the company. Tom is happy to be her friend. Neelix reports that every freighter captain he's spoken to knows nothing about Voyager, but all seem desperate to hire him, or really anyone for that matter. Chakotay pieces it together and comes up with a cunning plan. He and Neelix will try to infiltrate the main power plant by getting jobs. To avoid tipping off the Quarren, they'll go in on Neelix's smaller ship, and Chakotay will undergo a little cosmetic tune-up from the Doctor. Neelix has arranged job interviews for them both, and they'll have small subdermal transponders to keep an open channel. As they set off, the Doctor once again tries to argue that he should be the one calling the shots. Harry reminds him that his subroutines can be deleted with a single keystroke. Chakotay tells them both to work it out. On Quora, Annika is back on patrol. She corners Tuvok about missing his last 3 inoculations. Sweating and silent, Tuvok finally murmurs, 7 of 9. And before Annika can brush it off, he grabs her face and initiates a mind meld. She recoils, and just for a moment, she sees something else, a memory of stepping out of a regeneration alcove. Security yanks him away, but Tuvok protests, "We don't belong here." Act 5. Chakotay and Neelix begin their first day on the job. Their new boss is unimpressed with Chakotay's microkinetics aptitude, but thrilled to get someone with thermionics experience, especially since they just lost a specialist yesterday. Spoiler, it was Tuvok. Chakotay spots Janeway. She doesn't recognize him, and he doesn't push it. Instead, he plays the part of a new hire looking for help. Amal Kotay, he introduces himself, which Janeway clocks as odd but accepts, and she offers to show him the ropes. Elsewhere, Tuvok is back on the table. The Quarren doctor insists he's relapsing into dysphoria syndrome. Tuvok resists, but he's quickly sedated. The procedure begins. In the bar, Neelix and Tom are chatting like old friends. Tom is bragging that losing his job was the best thing that ever happened to him. Too many rules. Neelix compares it to working on a starship. Tom scoffs at the idea. Space travel makes him queasy. Meanwhile, B'Elanna is chatting with other expectant parents that Tom introduced her to. When she leaves, Tom offers to walk her out. She declines warmly this time, and he watches her go with a soft smile. Jaffin and Janeway arrive, and she invites Neelix and Chakotay to join them. Jaffin declines the company and quickly reveals his agenda. He wants Janeway to move in with him. After a slightly awkward beat, she quickly says yes. Later that night, B'Elanna is walking home alone when she runs into Chakotay, quite literally. He calls her by name, and she freezes. He pretends they're old friends, but she tries to brush him off. Then Chakotay grabs her arm to stop her from leaving, prompting her to cry out for help. Neelix appears from the shadows and grabs her from behind. As she struggles, Chakotay calls Voyager for an emergency beam-out. Harry initiates the transport just as 2 Quarren guards arrive. Neelix and B'Elanna are safe, but now Chakotay's in trouble. The guards give chase through the streets, and when he calls Voyager again, Harry has bad news. They're under attack by 2 Quarren ships, and shields are up, no beam-out possible. In sickbay, the doctor sedates the panicked B'Elanna while Neelix holds her steady. She fights it, then goes quiet. Back on Quora, Chakotay runs until there's nowhere left to go. Boxed in on a platform, surrounded by security, no transport in sight. Workforce, Part 2. Prologue. Chakotay's not done yet. Cornered on a high platform, he fakes out the guards by torching a fuel generator and making it look like he's taken a dive over the edge. When they rush to look, he circles back, stuns them, and gets away. Meanwhile, Voyager's fending off 2 Quarren patrol ships. The Doctor, still in his red command duds, pulls a tactical maneuver from his database, a photonic shockwave detonating a torpedo mid-space with a phaser blast. It disables both ships long enough for Voyager to slip away, but they spot 5 more incoming. Harry and the Doctor agree to retreat. Back on Quora, Chakotay finds Janeway at the bar. She still doesn't recognize him, but she's in a great mood. She's just moved in with Jaffin. Chakotay politely declines the celebratory dinner invite. He's stunned, also bleeding. Priorities. Act 1. Local investigators Yared and a Quarren officer show up looking for Neelix and B'Elanna. Tom plays dumb, concerned about B'Elanna, but barely remembers Neelix. Yared is suspicious, and Chakotay, overhearing what's going on, has slipped out quietly. Voyager is hidden in a huge moon crater, and the Doctor is treating B'Elanna in sickbay. Her memory has been scrubbed with surgical precision, but it's fixable. This is going to take a lot of time, neural rerouting, and the patience of others to help her remember her life. Looking at you, Neelix. Down in Cora's hospital, Tuvok is being attended to by doctors Ravik and Caden. Ravik is concerned about the patient's sense of confusion in words like Katra, but Caden quickly calls it a recurrence of dysphoria syndrome and schedules another round of neural resequencing. Any questions? Didn't think so. Tuvok pleads for help, but Ravik begins. Annika, a.k.a. Seven, has another flashback to the Borg Collective and checks in with the supervisor about Tuvok's absence. He tells her that Tuvok has been hospitalized, but it's nothing to worry about. Then investigator Yared walks in looking for Neelix, B'Elanna, and Chakotay. Annika checks the logs. None of them reported for work. Yared suspects Chakotay in the disappearance of Neelix and B'Elanna. Over at Janeway's new apartment, she's hauling in her many trinkets and talking plasma relay art with Jaffin. Back at her old place, she finds blood on a cloth, and Chakotay collapsed and bleeding in the dark, holding a weapon. Act 2. Understandably, Janeway is not thrilled to find a bleeding stranger lurking in her old apartment. Chakotay tries to explain that she's been brainwashed. He tells her about B'Elanna and begs her to treat his injury and not turn him in. A lot of innocent lives depend on it. She reluctantly agrees. Meanwhile, on Voyager, Neelix walks B'Elanna through her quarters. The personal touches start breaking through her memory. A wedding photo, the toaster, the TV. The pieces are clicking back into place. Janeway heads back to the power plant to borrow a dermal regenerator, lying to Seven that Jaffin had a cooking accident. When she spots the supervisor heading out, Seven is again suspicious enough to start digging into Tuvok's records and finds a whole lot of nothing. But doing the reverse search reveals something else entirely. Tuvok's been quietly accessing files on many other employees, too. Janeway patches Chakotay up. He pushes again. Isn't there so much more she could be doing with her life? Just then, Voyager calls. Harry and the Doctor are 8 light-years out, bouncing a signal on a fancy subspace frequency. Chakotay says he's found most of the crew, and he's with the captain herself. The call ends. Janeway's instincts kick in, and she moves to call security. Chakotay tries one last card. He drops the disguise and shows her his real face, showing that they are the same race. Act 3. Janeway brings the whole story to Jaffin. He doesn't buy it, and he appeals to the life that they're building here together. He convinces her to call security. When the guards arrive, they drag Chakotay to the hospital, and Yared has a few pointed questions. But before he can get any further, the order comes to move Chakotay to Division 6, aka Neuropathology. Yared tries to intervene, but the paperwork's been signed. Before being hauled away, Chakotay blurts out the truth to Yared. Aboard Voyager, Neelix cooks pancakes, while B'Elanna reads personal logs from Tom. Her memories and her feelings are starting to click. The Doctor and Harry are deep in strategy mode in the captain's ready room, working on how to get Voyager close without being noticed. The Doctor also indicates his desire to stay as the ECH and have Harry whip him up a new EMH program when this is all over. They'll have to shelve that conversation for now because just then they receive a transmission from Chakotay. He says he's about to shut down Kora's shield grid and gives Voyager precise orbital coordinates. But it's a trap. He's been reconditioned by Kaidan and is working under Quarren control. Dr. Ravik stops by to see Dr. Kaidan again, and he just can't seem to shake this weird feeling he has about the sudden uptick in dysphoria cases. Kaidan plays it off, and in fact, he's got the power plant supervisor right there with him, and he is definitely, absolutely, totally on top of it. No reason to be concerned. Thank you, and have a good day. Annika brings Yared some troubling data. All 138 alien workers, including herself, were processed through Division 6 and hired on the same day. In this economy, Yared can't act on it. He was just removed from the investigation that morning. Annika decides to go rogue and check out the hospital herself. There she finds Ravik and begins to describe the disturbing thoughts she's been having. Act 4. Ravik looks in Annika's file and sees that, surprise, surprise, she too was treated for dysphoria syndrome. When Ravik goes to find Kaidan, Annika starts snooping through the medical files. She finds dozens of cases, all tied to Kaidan. Meanwhile, Yared questions Janeway and Jaffin. She plays dumb about Chakotay at first, but Yared already knows the details. She relents and recounts everything Chakotay told her. When Ravik returns to his office, he confronts Kaidan about the files. Kaidan drops the facade. Yes, he brainwashed the co-workers, and no, there's no one left to report him to, so see ya. Tom quickly dismisses a security inquiry if he knows Annika. Then he walks right into a quiet gathering with Annika, Yared, Janeway, and Jaffin at the bar. They all learn the truth about the mind alterations, except Jaffin. He's not on the list. They hatch a plan to sneak into the central power facility and contact Voyager via subspace relay. Yared and Annika will hit the hospital. Both teams succeed. Annika and Yared confront Kaidan, while Janeway, Jaffin, and Tom send a message. Voyager picks it up just in time. Janeway is stunned to be addressed as Captain and see B'Elanna in a uniform. They make plans to beam everyone up, but 3 Quarren ships arrive and jam communications while on the surface, Janeway is surrounded by security. Act 5. Janeway gets close enough to a control panel with Jaffin's help to fake a core overload in the power facility. Same trick she nearly pulled by accident on day 1. The facility shuts down. Chaos ensues. In the hospital, Annika and Yurden have the upper hand with Kaidan at gunpoint. They demand the treatment stop and find even Dr. Ravik on an operating bed. Voyager, now clearly lured into a trap, prepares to turn the tables. Harry comes up with a tactical diversion and fires off 3 escape pods, meanwhile dampening the life signs of those aboard Voyager. The Quarren tractor the pods in, then boom, the Doctor makes them blow up real good, crippling the ships. Janeway's fake core overload takes the shield grid offline, and Voyager beams up the crew. The conspiracy is exposed. The Quarren ambassador assures Voyager that the workers will be treated and returned home, including thousands of others who were manipulated by Dr. Kaidan. Later, B'Elanna thanks Tom for looking after her, even when she didn't recognize him. Then she smacks him for flirting with the bar patrons. Fair. Jaffin visits Janeway. He was never brainwashed. He really was just a guy looking for work. He's been promoted, but now she's leaving. She gently tells him it wouldn't be right to ask him to come along. They part with an emotional embrace. On the bridge, Janeway reflects. The life she lived on Quara may have been fake, but it felt real. If Chakotay hadn't found her, she never would have known the difference. She's glad he did. Voyager resumes course for home. The end.
Now that was 2 episodes worth of recap. So not only was it about workforce, but your force of work, my friend, with those recaps. Bravo. Well done. I'm glad it was you, not me.
Yeah, well, thank you. Can I just say my intention, like in the back of my head, I thought, we're just doing 1 podcast episode. Can I get the recap down to 1 episode length? The answer is no. Unless I had put this away for another week and maybe come back to it and started the process all over again. And I did not have that amount of workforce in my body.
I don't know. There's just so much stuff to cover. So we're just going to kind of...
There's a lot onto it.
Yeah.
There really is. And you know, whether or not it all informs the points we're trying to walk away with, well, we'll get there. I do want to make a note here, though, because in the episode, we refer to people like Tom and Janeway and B'Elanna by their names. And Tuvok just has one name. He's like Madonna. He's Tuvok. Okay. But they make a point in the episode of calling Seven Annika.
Yeah.
And throughout the recap, I used Annika because she is only seen in the episode as Annika. We never see her again as 7 of 9.
Right.
You know, So that's just a little bit of warning here that we may use those names interchangeably.
Sure.
And that's just because it's habit, you know.
Right.
But let's get into it. Right at the top, really nice CG of this alien world. And I love the details like the maglev train. And we're kind of setting up, okay, how advanced are they? How not advanced are they? Cool stuff.
Something that really struck me funny when I watched Janeway walk around first the gangplank and then down the stairs and then into the workforce area. It looked almost exactly like the workflow that was the Warp 5 engine room in Enterprise.
Oh, you know they're just tucking away ideas there of how that set will come together.
It's just too similar. I mean, just the way it was blocked, the ins and outs, the exits, you know, from all different types of camera angles that I've memorized from that series. And I'm like, it's either really big coincidence or that was the set that was redressed.
Yeah. Hey, you use what you have.
Right.
And by the way, I wanted to mention I don't have call sheets for this, but I may append this later if I dig those up, because I think some of the exteriors, when they're in the plant, there is a location in Burbank that gets used over and over and over again when you have these sort of industrial settings. And I bet it's that one, but I will find out for sure.
It's also possible it's the Long Beach Reclamation Plant, because they use that in V and a lot of science fiction in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. And actually, that's bigger than the one in Burbank, so that might be the one.
The one. Yeah. Tylium was referenced again, the ore that they were mining, and
our old friend.
Tylium, very, very volatile. Yeah.
Speaking of old friends, I love the symmetry of Seven being the efficiency expert on Voyager, but also being that in this, brainwashed state, because of course is what she does.
I spent a lot of time looking at this episode, like the costuming in this episode, I think is very good. And
I agree.
There's a logic to the workers' uniforms, and I was trying to figure that out. There's the color system, and then there's also some type of ranking system on their shoulder, right next to their shoulder, underneath their collarbone, where there's a series of designs, but a gold highlight on each one of them.
Yeah. They're cool uniforms, and I like, especially the purple ones. There's something very Buck Rogers 1980 about those.
Totally.
And I love it. I love him. Again, with the casting here, I like the little hints about their real lives and their real nature. So Tom is exactly where he should be.
Yep.
There's a lot of good stuff mined out of that. And I love the intro with Tuvok laughing and then explaining Jaffin's joke.
The laughing Vulcan, it's so unnerving.
It is. And he plays it big.
He plays it big, but he was against type. Janeway was against type. Tom wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
B'Elanna wasn't, and Seven wasn't.
Seven's not.
Then what happened there between those two? Also, if Tuvok was acting kind of like a human, does that make him half a Vulcan?
Oh, good question.
Right. Also, Tipsy Tuvok is best Tuvok.
He's so up there with Fingerpoint Tuvok. Yeah. Tommy Gun Tuvok.
Yeah.
I love Tipsy.
Investor Tuvok.
Really interesting that the Earth that Janeway describes sounds like 20th century Earth.
Right.
So there are interesting details about what gets left in memory, what gets taken out of memory, what maybe gets manipulated. Maybe everybody who's there, who has been through this mind control, thinks that their home planet is awful. And it made me wonder, like, if we got any more detail, does she know why she's not on Earth anymore?
Right.
What is the manufacturer backstory? And does she even know how far Earth is away? Maybe she doesn't know that. Maybe she, this is like one planet over, but I'm here now and it's better, you know?
I do like the vibe of flirty Janeway.
Wonderful. Yep. Wonderful. Is Harry a vegetarian? Is that what we're supposed to get? Because it seems weird that Neelix would say specifically, Chakotay is a vegetarian. You drank this nectar made from meat. And then he would be, which, by the way, meat nectar, kids, don't use that as an album title. You know, just we're pulling that one off the list.
Although I did hear it was one of Spinal Tap's next album names. So
that's why you can't use it, because Spinal Tap already has the rights to it.
Okay, good. Yeah. It's a weird element in the script. Chakotay mentions trading with the Nar Shaddaa. And if you're a Star Wars fan, that probably sounded familiar because the planet that the Hutt dynasty comes from is called Nar Shaddaa.
Oh.
So maybe there was someone in the writing staff that they're fans of Star Wars planets. Emergency Command hologram. I have so many questions.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm glad that it's a pretense that we created that we brought back. That's good.
If the crew abandoned ship, then does the emergency hologram take over and go down with the ship?
Oh, boy, that's a good question.
You know, if he's in command, then why isn't he wearing pips, but he's wearing a comm badge? Right?
Okay. Maybe he doesn't get pips because it is a role rather than a rank.
Well, I have much to say about that later.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a leading question. He has both then medical and command abilities then.
One would think that one doesn't overwrite the other. So why say, you need to make a new one?
So if he had to make a decision between saving a life or saving the ship, which one would he take?
Oh, human decision required.
Does the Hippocratic Oath override his command code?
I would hope so.
That's, again,
God, these are great questions.
Yeah. I stay up at night with these
stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about flirty Janeway, and I just love how Kate plays this version. It's just a little bit different. It's just looser. It's more playful. At her essence, she's still the same, but we just get this other facet, and I love it. I think it's such a good performance.
Well, it's just like the weight of command is taken off her shoulders, like literally. So if you don't have that, then who are you without that? Right?
Yeah.
If they abducted Voyager's crew, then why keep their names? I mean, why not give them new identities as well?
That is such a good question about, again, what gets left in memory, what gets taken out, why is something harder to extract than another. That maybe is some detail that could have been exposed a bit. Again, the thing with, we come back to this idea that Harry had this drink, it still upset his stomach 3 days later. And I kept asking myself, is this going to be germane to the story, or is this the thing that we do and then never reference again? Because apparently that's what we did, is we catch up with him in astrometrics. He's still complaining about it. And then, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those
all
burps must have been gnarly in astrometrics. I do love that B'Elanna is like in her default mode, even if it's not the B'Elanna that she knows. She's sitting by herself, drinking a mug of coffee and reading a pad.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what B'Elanna does, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
and again, the subtlety of differences in her performance are really nice to see. I think everybody kind of nails that. Mm-hmm. Man, this may come back in your discussion about the ECH, but I still wonder, with Harry and Chakotay back on board, yes, the ECH is active, but does that mean he's actually in command? Because Chakotay is the first officer and he's there. Why would there be any backtalk about taking commands?
Right. Liberty, I guess.
Okay.
So Harry says that no Vulcans or Bolians were detected in his scans on the planet. So why so specific about Vulcans and Bolians? Like, were there more Vulcans and Bolians on board Voyager? And would that give him ample data to scan them to see where everyone else is?
You know, it's because Bolians are so beautifully blue.
True.
And if we want to find anybody, we want to find those beautiful blue Bolians.
Blue Bolians, right?
What was it? A Quarren pot roast that Janeway burned? Like, was that something they couldn't extract? That this Janeway still remembers how to be such an awful cook and makes the same mistakes as the other Janeway. And by the way, it doesn't look like quite a pot roast. It kind of looks like a terrine, but you know, that's fine.
It would have been neat if she made Jaffin a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
That would have been great. Yeah. With a Quarren toaster.
Exactly.
Yeah. But Janeway, again, she's like kicked back. She's living her life.
Okay, so I'm not digging it overall right now. Like, I understand like where they're going with this, but it's like, if she didn't have the weight of the captaincy and the weight of obviously 150 lives and the lives that she's lost so far in the 7 years on her psyche, is this what we are to believe she would have been? Like, I don't know if that's the case.
Well, maybe, but here's the thing. It's all about the mind control, and there might be something in there that enforces this kind of subservience. You're there to work for this company, to work for this power plant, but you're also there to be subservient to the kind of societal structure that's there. We don't have room for somebody who would take command and potentially lead 150 people out of here.
And yet, Seven still retains, or Annika still retains, that tone of her personality.
She's efficient.
And in every way.
And analytical.
And she still has her implant.
Yeah. See, I wondered about that. Like, the Borg thing might be some way to unlock what's going on, but they really didn't play that up, you know?
I mean, there is a fair amount of, like, I referenced this as being kind of like Lair of the Lotus Eaters type of thing. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Tom? I think generally not being a weirdo here. He's just, he's a guy who's mismatched for conventional work, but he's not being a weirdo. By the way, what species is Chakotay supposed to be here?
I believe he's a Kuchimoyan.
Oh, that's it. That's what he is. Yeah. We avoid the Talaxian thing. And I have to wonder if it was in the script originally. Like, we're going to turn Chakotay into a Talaxian. And he was like, over my dead tattoo.
Yeah, he is a Kuchimoyan, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. He's 100% a Kuchimoyan.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Man, again, the doctor he's so whiny about not being in command.
So, yeah.
Weird moment.
There's this whole thing with kind of like, this is the technobabble thing. If you're going to bring up technobabble, then I'm going to notice technobabble. So,
yeah.
Harry said earlier that there's no way to beam through the shield grid. Mm-hmm. And then Neelix is given the subdural transporter before, like, he and Chakotay go down. And then Neelix says, "What's this?" And Harry says, "It's a subdermal transponder. It will allow us to maintain an open comlink so we can transport you through the shield grid if there's trouble." You just said there's no way to beam them through the shield grid.
Yeah.
Like, now, I understand it's the transponder, but if he has the transponder and then grabs B'Elanna, she doesn't have a transponder, so...
Right. Oh, yeah. That's right. Are they splitting the difference between the shield grid that's there versus Voyager's shield?
I don't know.
Yeah, that was a little bit weird thing. By the way, Chakotay's fake name. Why even the pretense of a fake name? Where did this Amal Kotay come from?
I was online and I looked up a few possibilities, and then I went into the Wikipedia on Akuchimoyan, the culture.
Yes, yeah.
And then as far as I can tell, as far as the translation goes, it's translated as my people's intensifies. That's what I found.
No, that's probably right.
Yeah.
There's no reason for that to not be it.
Also, a little bit of kind of like a subdirection of when you said you have to turn to a specific individual and your eyes intensify.
Of course.
Yeah, that's a very Akuchimoyan cultural habit.
I love that we were learning so much about Akuchimoyan habits in this episode. I also love that we got a shout out to Mulcahy and Tal Celeste.
Yeah.
Man, if only we'd gotten a shout out to Baxter as well.
We kind of did, but kind of didn't. You know?
Yeah, but not by name.
That's true.
I need that.
Yeah, I get that. I do like Neelix being subtle and trying to slip Tom like these questions that are, I guess they're supposed to like spark some type of memory.
Yeah, I like that.
I love this line. So, this is Joffin to Janeway. So, if we were to combine our resources over a drink,
right here in front of everybody.
Yeah, I was like, that's a bold move. That's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how that paid off, right? I do like the editing at the end of part 1 because it has like it's all of the different like disparate threads that are kind of fraying at the seams and how are they going to resolve. I thought that was really done. It's going back and forth and back and forth. It's kind of like at the end of like a Star Wars movie where you have all like the 3 different stories going on. You're like on the planet or somewhere or like in a fight, and then it just keeps going back and forth. That was well done, well edited.
Yeah. It ramped up the intensity for the cliffhanger. And I like coming back in the next episode that just in the teaser segment, we resolve the cliffhangers, and I thought in a very satisfying way, because that could just feel like kind of a blow off, you know, but I thought it was actually done well.
I was just wondering, there was like a scene or two in the episode Repentance that we did, a few episodes ago, and we were always wondering, are those phasers on stun? When like people grab phasers, are like, oh, I hope that's not like on disintegrate or kill.
I know. They're just always picking up a weapon and just using it.
Yeah.
And you hope for the best.
Like if you pick up a sword in a fight, it's not on blunt. Nope. It's on still.
This is a sword set on blunt.
Like, oh my God, I got hit by a blunt sword. Oh, thank God.
Once we've sort of turned our attention to Caden, I feel like right from the start of Workforce Part 2, it's just like, okay, he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Because just like in that scene in Act 1, just whatever the problem is, I recommend a mind wipe. Yeah, just, at that point, he's the bad guy.
So, first of all, Ralph Malph is a doctor.
Yeah, absolutely he is.
And I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask the audience, is that really the most we could get out of this performance?
Bravo.
Thank you. Yeah. Voyager hiding in the moon's crater. It's very Empire Strikes Back of them.
Definitely.
But I'm glad I didn't see any Minox or a space slug, because that would have been the most they could do with that scene.
I like slowly building trust between Chakotay and Janeway. The stuff is done very well. And I love the little tour of Tom and B'Elanna's quarters, because that precious toaster right there, and the antique TV, as if there would be any other kind of TV in the 24th century.
I thought at the end of Prophecy, though, we saw a different bat'leth, a ceremonial bat'leth that was...
We did.
On the wall, so it's back to the other bat'leth, so I thought it was a little strange.
Man, this episode and in episodes previous, Voyager really leaning into that super dark lighting scheme. And I love this stuff. And, Janeway's Quarren apartment with Chakotay and many other scenes are just quiet and dark, and you just let the actors show through. A lot of good stuff. Yeah. And then I love Janeway's revelation there when he uses the dermal regenerator, and she goes, "We're the same race." And I'm thinking, we're more than that. I once built you a bathtub, And
I think would have really jogged her memory I mean, aside from de-regenerating his face,
Yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, what I was getting to was if Chakotay pulled out a monkey, and it's not that kind of show, folks. I mean, there was a monkey in Resolutions. You know that.
There was.
We all know that. But Chakotay specifically said before he went down to the planet that the doctor has very specific qualities in terms of cosmetic restoration.
Yeah.
And then Chakotay just magic wands that all over his face, and he said, "Nope, all done."
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dermal regenerator is like the sonic screwdriver of Star Trek. You know, you just do whatever you need it to do.
Right.
Yeah. Once again, personal logs, not private. I like the scene with B'Elanna and the pancakes. I like the emotion that she brings to the scene. But yeah, personal logs, no. And I love this. Caden totally gaslighting Ravak. It's like, yeah, there's no need to apologize for literally getting so close to discovering exactly what's going on.
You're one question away from death, but no, it's fine.
Yeah, you don't need to apologize to me. Yeah.
So when Chakotay was bargaining with the investigator, like question for question, would that be considered quid pro Chakotay?
Yes.
Move over Inspector Tuvok. Inspector Annika is taken over.
Yeah, she's good. We needed her to figure some things out here. Mm-hmm. I love Ravak confronting Caden. 64 cases all on the same day, and you were the attending physician. And Caden's like, "Oh yes, I remember. Quite an outbreak." like his memory had to be jogged. Like, oh yeah, there was that day. Oh yeah,
there's a sprained ankle, a cut finger, and 64 admissions. Yeah, sure.
So, yeah.
Light day. When Yaren comes to investigate Janeway, I thought it was a lost opportunity because he said like criminal investigations, and it could have been criminal space investigations or CSI.
Perfect. Yeah.
Investigations in space.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Great quiet use in this episode. Just, kill sound effects, and you get Jaffin just deciding to be all in with them. Really nice moments for everybody here. I love Seven in the hospital, like kind of breaking the ruse, and that she's on the examining bed and then goes to Caden. "I suggest you comply." Yes, you do not comply. Wonderful. Janeway's confusion at what's going on when she calls Voyager and sees B'Elanna. Wonderful. I love the way she plays that moment. And finally, Norman, I love that Harry got some spotlight here with a brilliant tactical idea.
Yeah.
I did wonder when Voyager will get their escape pods back ever, because they're all gone now and blew some up.
I did love the old escape pods filled with explosives that the enemy never is smart enough to scan because of overconfidence trick.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And really way to end this on an emotional note. I love that goodbye scene with Janeway and Jaffin, and I wonder if she will remember him fondly the way she does Mark.
Hey, Mission Log listeners. This is a big moment for us, and we want your help shaping what comes next.
That's right. We're launching a Roddenberry Podcast listener survey running now through October 10th, and we want to hear from you about Mission Log, the Trek Files, Genealogy, our YouTube content, social media, Discord, and beyond.
This is your chance to give us honest feedback, help us plan for the future, and maybe even influence how we tackle our next big chapter, Mission Log Enterprise.
And to say thank you, we're giving away something truly special. Limited edition plaques featuring authentic film cells from Star Trek, the original series.
These are actual 35mm frames from the cutting room floor. No two are alike. They're rare, one-of-a-kind Trek artifacts, and we're giving away multiple plaques to lucky winners like you. Maybe you.
So here's how it works. Number 1, complete the survey. The link is in the show notes. 2, you will get a secret code by email. And 3, enter that code on our giveaway page to unlock your entry.
Again, that survey link is right there in the show notes, on your podcast app, on our site, or wherever you're listening now.
We're charting the course for the next phase of Roddenberry podcasts, and with your input, we will boldly go together.
If Seven really wants to keep efficiency up, she should make sure no one empties the coffee pot without starting a fresh pot of coffee. Those people are the worst. If you kill the Joe, you make some mo.
Hey, I want to go back to this idea that you teased in the last segment about the doctor being the ECH, the emergency command hologram.
Yeah.
Because you have some questions about how that plays out and what he can do. And I thought, there is an interesting parallel here automatically, because you've got two sides of the story where you have the rest of the crew who are abducted and certainly do not consent to this bit of reprogramming that they've had. Their identities have been changed and they're fighting this idea of returning back to who they were, right? But then you have the doctor. He fully consented and cooperated and co-developed this ECH program. And then he drops this bomb on Harry that he doesn't want to go back to being a doctor.
Yeah.
He's just like, no, just make a new one of those. This thing is better. So it's like there's some kind of like ego or something attached to it. And then what? You just leave the ECH on at all times as well, so you can whine about not getting command and then countermand Janeway? Like, how does that work out?
I mean, it's an interesting thing that you brought up the word ego, because I think that's exactly what it is. And it kind of like frames the whole Doctor's experience, that his ego is actually evolving in his subroutine. And it's, again, it kind of like, it goes into the overall argument of sentience and sentient rights. Because if they believe that they exist, if they believe, and I'm talking about not just the Doctor, but Data or any other character that like inhabits like this particular argument and storyline, then you go back to the criteria of measure of a man, because it becomes precedent. And if the precedent can be proven, then it becomes part of the law that you're debating, especially in a sequence like this. But I saw this particular scene a different way. And I saw it through the lens of a model minority.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's, the emergency command hologram kind of clapped back at Harry when he said, an emergency command hologram programmed with over 2 million tactical subroutines outranks an ensign. No, it does not.
Yeah.
He was given command by Janeway for a very specific reason, but how does this program outrank an actual officer? Right? It doesn't, as far as any of the books that I've read about command structure. It's as if you put a crewman in charge of command and basically saying, because I have 30 years of combat experience, I outrank you. Said probably never did Miles O'Brien say that to an ensign.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Because he knows.
And by the way,
it's true.
And Harry Kim has been in charge. He has been in command of Voyager multiple times.
Right.
We haven't seen them all.
Right.
Some of them in overnight, but he has.
Exactly. So I said, that's not really how that works. And I understand that this is a dramatic situation that they put both of these characters in, but it's interesting how they wrote Harry, because he knows that he's the ensign. He knows that he outranks the officer. He knows where his position is, and he's always wanted to be in command. Now, because of Nightingale, I really think that damaged his confidence.
I agree, and that's why Nightingale should have been in season 2 or 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't Harry who sat in Janeway's chair in her ready room. It was the Doctor ordering Harry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but why didn't Chakotay just say, Harry's an officer, he's in command? That's how the structure works. And technically, Harry outranks Chakotay because Chakotay is not a commissioned Starfleet officer.
You're right.
He is Maquis still.
He is Maquis.
Right? Because he wears the pin. And you know what? If people say like, well, it's just a formality. No, it's not. It is specifically because Janeway wanted to blend the two crews, but that doesn't work that way. Technically, even the Doctor outranks Chakotay in that sense when it comes to Starfleet protocol.
Yeah.
Right? In this case. Yeah. But Harry is playing what I call the model minority stereotype again in this particular situation because of what happened in Nightingale. It's not that he learned from his mistakes. It's what Asians generally default to, which is I made the mistake and now I do not believe I earn my next opportunity because of that mistake. I've damaged my career irrevocably. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why Harry doesn't deserve the promotion. I mean, I can put that in the context of that is why I can accept why Harry hasn't, at least in this timeline, he hasn't risen above ensign because he probably doesn't want to, and he hasn't put himself into another position to actually shine in a command situation. So what does that say? Like the Doctor actually has more ambition as a program than a flesh and blood ensign from Starfleet? I mean, how does the hologram outstrip someone else's flesh and blood motivations?
Well, I mean, here's part of the problem with that hologram, though, is that the EMH has obviously some guiding principles, has some parameters set up around what he can and cannot do. And we've gone away from this idea of, think back to season 1, season 2, where he's just popping up on monitors all over the ship and seemingly having, free reign over everything. The ECH doesn't seem to have any parameter around him that would say, oh, no, when a commanding officer is on board, you are no longer in command. Because by that logic, you flip him on once, and then only when Janeway comes back is he able to go back in the box, or literally, he is the same hologram. It's just aspects of the program that's running, either leaning more toward medical or leaning more toward command. But you asked again earlier, can he still treat patients? Is he still bound by the Hippocratic Oath while he is in command?
But didn't you also feel that he was being maybe even a little bit more aggressive than usual once he was given, not necessarily because that program was written, but he's like, oh, I'm in command now. Therefore, I'm kind of like unlocking the subroutines of what I believe command style is.
Yeah. And I guess like the early days of the Doctor, he's completely lacking the nuance that comes along with being an effective, good commander. He lacked bedside manner as a Doctor. He's lacking, for lack of a better phrase, command manner. He's lacking the nuance of how to actually deal with a team instead of just barking out orders. But does he learn anything from that, though? I don't think we catch up with him long enough at the end of this to know that, okay, there's actually an arc here for him, that he does all of his stuff. He whines about not getting what he wants. He whines about not being commander long enough or with enough power, or, he also has to do some of the grunt work because, hey, we all have a ship to put back together. But as he learned by the time he gets to the end of it, no, part of this job is you have to effectively connect with the people who are under your command.
And I think this would have been a really good coda for Harry's Nightingale experience, watching the Doctor act like Harry did when Harry was on the Nightingale. It's like, oh, okay, now I get it. And the reason why I'll be able to be a more effective leader is to process what I learned there, be a team member, make the dream work, and then say, you know what? Maybe that is kind of like a better path of understanding, towards command.
And this is where we need Seven back to put the Doctor in his place.
Or B'Elanna.
Yeah, right. But Seven did that effectively with Harry in Nightingale.
That's true.
So, yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about Caden, because I think it's an interesting character, but I also think we don't get enough, and we don't really get the background and motivation of what's going on here. We have a situation. We understand the situation is there is a labor shortage, and whoever is in charge at whatever level here has decided, you know what, it's best that we just import people, essentially create our own slave race, but we'll maybe feel good about it because we'll make them want to be here. We'll make them feel like they belong here, that this is the best thing that they get to do. I'm not fully understanding. Is Caden driven by is there some economic benefit to him? Is it just an ideological thing that he believes in this hyper-capitalistic system, and that's why he's on board with it? Is he driven by sort of the power of using his new mind control technique? I'm trying to really put a pin on him, but we get what he does, not what actually drives him.
Right. And that's actually a really good way to think about, was there extra material that was borrowed from Critical Care and kind of turned into a different story, or like saved for later in case they ran out of material? Because you can see Caden as being kind of like an amalgamation of the controller and the doctor that was treating the patients, because the doctor was doing it for the right reasons, but he was under the controller's capitalist schemes. And this character, Caden, is both, but we didn't understand him like we understood the controller and the doctor in Critical Care. And they almost kind of thwarted Caden in the same way with Seven.
Yeah.
It's very similar. It's almost as if, let's take Critical Care, but add everyone into it, give them like different roles, but have kind of the same outcome, So there's a lot of similarities to it. I don't know if this is too much of a pivot, but why this is a 2-part story.
Well, yeah, because if you're not going to have that background that might be necessary to understand the driving factors here, if you're not going to have that, then do you need to not have that across 2 episodes? Can you effectively not have that in 1 episode?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, and for fear of jumping ahead to our final thoughts here, I think there are some things that are done very effectively. And I do want to pose this question while we're in this segment. Janeway, looking at her experience at the end and her emotional goodbye with Jaffin, which, by the way, we are coming up here at the end of season 7.
Getting there.
She could have taken him.
Yeah.
Do you think the crew would forgive her for having hardworking boyfriend?
It's I know that there was a specific line where they did mention kind of like they glossed over being crew and having an issue with being in a relationship with a crew member, but he doesn't have to make her like him crew, quote unquote. He's just there. He's a passenger.
Yeah.
Right. He's not serving the ship in really any major capacity that would jeopardize any type of efficiency as being part of the crew member, or being part of the crew and underneath her leadership. So I think that Voyager has lost a lot of opportunities to pepper in these characters that may or may not have been really interesting for a few episodes, like the Herodian engineer that was able to mine data from the holograms. He was a really interesting character, smart, capable, breaking the monoculturalistic stereotype, and they let him just kind of go. And Caden could have been really interesting too, if they wanted to add that kind of a dynamic between either Janeway, Chakotay, and Caden.
Jaffin.
Or sorry, Jaffin.
Yeah, we don't want to add Caden. That guy's no good.
Jaffin, Chakotay, and Janeway, just to have that little bit of awkwardness sometimes. But
I feel they could have kept him around for another couple episodes. Maybe he leaves. Maybe he gets a better offer. But it's interesting that you end the episode like that, with the implication that all of these characters not only have recovered their memories pre-procedure, pre-Caden, but they also remember everything that they did on Quora. because Janeway remembers and has a real fondness, a real emotional attachment to her time with Chaffin. And, it is kind of played for laughs, but B'Elanna, her thing with Tom, slapping him for flirting with the bar patrons. Yeah, it's a joke, but she remembers that whole sequence. And so all of these characters presumably remember their entire... Tuvok remembers laughing like an idiot at the joke.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there are strange things about him, again, some of the crew not remembering, but acting the way they traditionally act. They have the same mannerisms, have the same type of personalities. But then you have Tuvok being emotional when all he was really given was a new set of memories. Now, does that mean that it overrides the Vulcan logical conditioning of, say, a culinar discipline?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe, but that leaves us with this really interesting question. Do any of these characters walk away with some change or some fulfillment, some conclusion of a character arc because they went through this and they remember the experience? Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, you get to the end and it's just solve the problem, get in Voyager, go away. And you have this bit of, melancholy with Janeway, but all we're really left with is just the idea that, well, that's sad. She can't have a relationship again. But we don't know how this affects anybody else and how long that effect might linger.
I think the one thing that I think would have been, a bit more impactful, because they were taken against their will and because they were enslaved, if you will, for a workforce, they didn't really have a bad life, right? Mm-hmm. They weren't under some type of, cruel capitalist or fascist regime where they were given basically a 6x9 cell, basically gray work clothes, a slave master or, a taskmaster, whipping them at every turn or starving them, things of that nature where we have seen happen. And there wasn't really a story of workers' rights, forming a union, pushing back against, the capitalist bosses, and the structure of labor that keeps people pinned down by society.
Well, and there you go. So I think there's a really fundamentally interesting idea here that doesn't get the attention in the way that this story is told. Let's go back to the Cage. Okay, our pilot with Captain Pike, and Pike was shown this cage, literally, where everything was okay. He could have anything that he wanted, but was it better to live like that and be the object of the collection that the Telosians have, or to live his truth out in the universe as captain of the Enterprise? Look at other episodes of Star Trek that have questioned, well, if we could change our identity just a little bit, but it's still actually okay, the life you live is okay, and you're not being hurt, you're not being abused, you're not being, well, you can certainly make the argument here that they are being exploited because they are being exploited for their labor, but they have relatively comfortable lives outside of that. So there is the ethical problem of consent. There is the ethical problem of rewriting somebody's memory or personality, their drives. But there is still something fundamentally about that person that still exists.
And I think that would have been really interesting to play off of the structure of the workforce, the labor force, because obviously Seven, or Annika, was administration. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Janeway was still in kind of like this middle management position. Mm-hmm. And Tuvok, he was wearing a different colored uniform. He was wearing like a gold colored uniform. And he almost came off as being kind of like the surly, minor, brawny, labor, muscle type character.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see that played out a little bit more, where there was a structure to how did these different types of people, because of their personality, retaining their personalities as their former Starfleet selves, they found a way to work together through the different layers of labor.
Yeah.
You know, because they knew that fundamentally they, as a cohesive union, would be able to at least have better negotiating power against the powers that be that put them there.
Well, but therein lies the rub. So we're not doing that story from DS9, and we're also not doing a story about the nature of identity. We're doing more of a catch the bad guy who has a mind control machine story. And maybe that's how we'll wrap it up here in a second.
If you add one letter to the title of this episode, it changes the story completely. Here's an example: Twerk Force. You're very welcome.
All right, we worked our way through it, Norman, and at least I think it's my, built-in natural personality that has arrived here at the end of the show. I don't know. Maybe I was programmed to do this 3 days ago, and the previous 590 episodes of Mission Log are all a construct. I don't know, but I'm happy doing this, so I'll leave it at that.
Well, you didn't force anything. You worked, but you didn't force anything, did you?
Exactly. Yeah. All right. But we've arrived here at the end, and we will ask ourselves, as we usually do on Mission Log, Workforce Parts 1 and 2. Does the episode or episodes hold up, and what did we learn? So if you indulge me, I'm just going to say that from a point of view of holding up, there's a lot that I like. I like that throughout Season 7, we've gotten more episodes that have a lot of guest stars. Makes this universe feel a bit bigger instead of what we get sometimes, which is, a bottle show, maybe one guest, and you go like, is that all that's here? Yeah, well, in this case, we have a big place, and there are a lot of people that populate that place. We're also doing something stylistically ambitious. We spend a lot of time on Quarren, and it's not just in the workplaces, but in the living quarters and in that scary clinic hospital, the neuropathology center, the bar even. So it feels like a pretty well fleshed out world, even if there are details about motivation and background that we don't know. And there are a lot of places here that you just kind of have to take the story for what it is, and I guess not try to force too much detail out of it. Who came up with this brainwashing plan? How do they benefit? How many people know about it? Has this been going on for a while? Is this brand new? Is anyone suspicious about all these off-world people showing up and just knowing how to do this work? If you dig too deeply, I think the pieces don't really fit together perfectly well. But I think the episode overall works in spite of any of the shortcomings. So we get to see our characters play something else, and we get to solve a mystery along the way, again, in this light, high concept sci-fi construct. We get to speculate a little bit of what if, which is fun, maybe especially now that we're getting so close to the end of the series. You have this little tease again. What if Janeway has a romance? What if this is somebody that she could fall for? What if they stopped and took on another job? Would any of them really be happy doing something else? Here's the thing. You could do the same story on TNG or elsewhere. Okay, a guy invents a mind control thing. They're throwing people to work. We have to unravel the mystery and get people to be their real selves again. But if you did that same story anywhere else, if you did it on TNG or something, I think you might lose some of the emotional impact which we get in that final scene. I love that scene of Janeway saying goodbye to Jeffen. And I think this is where Voyager, when it's good, really makes the most out of a high-concept sci-fi piece like this. So the downside is it doesn't really push the long arc forward that much, but as a standalone story, I think it works quite well, with one exception. It takes too long to get there. Because if we're not getting the details that can really underline either how this place works and why, or at the end, what impact does it have on our characters? What do they learn? And how does it affect them? Then it's just spending a lot of time to solve a mystery.
Yeah.
But I think going along for that ride is satisfying. It is fun. So I do think it holds up. Just maybe there are some places it could have been handled better.
A toiter, like a tiger?
Toiter. A little toiter, like a tiger.
Yeah.
How about you?
You know, I had this entire script written out, and as we do in Mission Log, you know, when we have our observations and discuss them, and then we have the discussion and discuss those points, you know, some things change, and you kind of see some new perspective, especially like when we're talking about things from our points of view. And one of the things, like, I'm not really going to add anything I think that's going to be extraordinary of any greater value for my observations, because I think you handled pretty much everything in terms of what this episode was, could have been, and what we wanted from it. And here's a phrase that I've used before with Voyager. It's not bad. It's just vanilla.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
vanilla can be good sometimes.
Sure.
In the right place. Now, you did mention earlier that we are coming close to the end of Voyager, and we have come off of a series of some incredibly great, but also emotionally taxing episodes.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm wondering if this is kind of the pause or the calm before the storm.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Right? Because this might be their chance of, okay, these are our characters. We're kind of refreshing like what we know about them in a very interesting way of giving them these alternate lives, the possibility of alternate futures, Janeway having a fulfilling relationship, all of these characters doing all of these things that are kind of like them, but they're not kind of like them, and kind of like the what if factor. And that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go back to, okay, now we're going to do this 8-9 episode march to the end. And maybe they're going to take us in a very specific way where you're not going to get that breath of fresh air anymore in order to complete their storyline. Now, that all being said, I do wish that with the vanilla, there was a little bit of, I don't know, like toasted walnuts, a little bit of hot fudge, a little bit of sprinkles.
A little salted caramel, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you needed something to push the tone a little bit to make you really feel that being shanghaied to this workforce was a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's terrible in one sense, but it's also not terrible that they're not being tortured by the labor that they're providing.
Yeah.
Right? They're not under hardship in a way. You know, they have nice living quarters, a clean work environment, a wonderful bar to socialize in. Obviously, they can cook for themselves. They have the means that to provide for their needs, where in a lot of labor forces, that is not the case, right? Yeah. You are essentially just cheaper than automation.
Yeah.
Right. And that is hence like a lot of, you know, after coming off of Labor Day not too long ago, you really got to think about the restructuring of the 16-hour work day versus the 888 work day that the unions fought for in the late 1800s. So, yeah, I wanted to see a little bit more of that. I wanted to see like Surly Tuvok would have been the best Tuvok. Surly Tuvok, right? Just covered in soot, kind of just beaten down by the mines. And with a Cockney accent, because that's what I want out of a Surly Tuvok. But then you have Seven, you know, who is this, or in this case, Annika, who's this administrator that suits her personality to the T.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have, you know, Tom and B'Elanna, kind of like the workhorse couple. That would have been really, really interesting, where Tom's looking for a better way for someone that he's falling into a relationship with a child. Like, I just can't be a bartender anymore. I got to find better work.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have Janeway. It's like, you know, I do like my autonomy, but I also like being in a relationship too. So how do I manage the work-life balance, which is completely out of balance as Captain.
Right.
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 And they were almost there. but not quite. And that's like the only thing that really, I think, holds this episode back. Could they have done it in an hour? I think so. They would have had to sacrifice some of the other arcs, but the vanilla episode in this case is something that I actually would recommend.
Yeah. Well, and look, maybe what you're getting at, if it had only been an hour and you're really just stripping away any pretense of doing something deeper than, hey, mind control is terrible and our characters need to find a way out, I think you can do that in an hour and have a perfectly satisfying, snappy episode. When you make it 2 episodes, then I feel like our expectation is that we are going to get something a little bit deeper, has a little bit more impact. And there are moments here. There are moments that feed that. Again, Janeway just absolutely shines in this. And I think you need that coda with her at the end. But how much more could we have gotten if we really took some time to figure out how does this affect others? What are the benefits or sacrifices about where they are and why? Like, why is this going on down here? And that honestly is what brings me to, what did we learn? Our morals, meanings, messages, because there is something at the core of this episode about identity, this question here about identity. And I want to cast your eyes back to 2 previous episodes of Star Trek. Go back to TNG, The Inner Light, where you have Picard with a different lived experience that he goes through. And then at the end, you go, well, wait a minute. He actually got to live somebody else's life. What is that impact like? What does he gain from that? And that has had lasting impact. We've seen that come back in subtle and not so subtle ways in the character of Picard, right? But let's also look at something else that is quite serious, and that is the episode The Outcast. And if people don't remember, famously, that's an episode where you have an androgynous species that then uses a mind control technique. They use a kind of therapy to change those who express male or female traits. All right. Certainly politically relevant at the time, certainly politically relevant now. And my disappointment, and look, it's not because the writers are obligated to write the story that I expect them to write. No. The story that they're telling is the story that they're telling, and that's okay. But I bring up those episodes, and particularly The Outcast, to say that's an episode that really went to the mat to do something about identity and about the horror of changing somebody's persona, changing their identity against their will, and what that is about. And that, of course, at the time, and now plays into ideas of sexuality and gender, etc., right? This episode completely plays on the surface of that. And that's why we didn't get into that discussion in the last segment, because it only serves as the pretense, as sort of the sci-fi magic machine here that does a thing that we have to undo. But it really doesn't get into the depths of what that means. So I wanted to bring that up specifically to say, wow, okay, maybe you could have a discussion about that as it relates to this episode, but I don't think the episode is trying that hard. And it's not because the writers of this episode can't try that hard. That's just not the episode they were writing. And that's okay. There's still some things to take out of this. So yes, it is a story that looks and feels and smells like an evil doctor manipulating people for the greater good. See also examples in history, Nazi experiments, etc. We don't really get the background here on what led the Korans to do this and what the reaction is to it across multiple strata of their society. So we can't really get into the ethical decision-making there. We don't really know. But there is the premise just by itself and the surprise of others figuring out what happened. So I kind of feel like we haven't done this one in a while. Maybe there's the ugly convergence of greed, capitalism, and exploitation of science and technology. It takes me back to previous episodes of Mission Log where I got to quote Fritz Lang's Metropolis. The mediator between the head and the hands must be the heart. Mm-hmm. Here is a society that takes that to an extreme and says, well, yeah, we got the head. We know how to control that. So now we can control the hands and completely remove the heart from the equation. I also think there's this really, again, I keep going back to this final scene because I think it's so critical for the whole episode to have emotional impact. It felt like home moment to Janeway, even if it wasn't real. And she's glad that Chakotay rescued her. So here's another familiar Mission Log refrain that I've used before, kind of paraphrasing Carl Sagan. It's that age-old question. If it's better to know the truth, given that the truth might be difficult, might have its own set of problems, is it better to know the truth or to persist in delusion, no matter how comforting that delusion might be? And Janeway, again, as she has done over and over again, and in the tradition of great Star Trek captains, has chosen the truth. So there is something to be taken from that. So what about you, Norman? What did you learn from Workforce?
Well, that's a great moral in itself. I mean, the way you ended that, because it just brings me back to Picard. The first duty for any Starfleet officer is, the truth, whether it's the truth, personal truth, or...
Yeah.
I think that the morals, meanings, and messages would be a lot easier to identify if they pushed the tone for this episode just a little bit further. There wasn't enough push and pull to say that, this is about capitalism, or this is about slavery, or this is about exploitation, or this is about... Now, I'm not saying that we want bonk bonk on the head all the time. You want a little ambiguity so that you can actually use your own morality as a compass, as a way to filter the message as it affects you. But the thing is, everything's done so on the surface that it kind of explains why you had to break down such a long recap, because everything is surface plot.
Yeah.
It really is a lot of subtlety or subtext going on here, because there's nothing that really drives you any further past the surface than maybe the mind meld that allows, Tuvok to be the catalyst for everyone else to start questioning, why are we here? Now, I get that. It's a really interesting way to do it, but in the ultimate moral meaning or message, you really don't get to it until the second or third act of the second episode.
Yeah.
So that's an hour and 30 minutes. Until Caden and his doctor said that, the reason why you stole these people is so that you could change their memories and turn them into a workforce labor product because you're a capitalist. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But does it take an hour and a half to tell that?
That's really interesting, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, this is not an episode where you actually need a reveal.
Yeah.
You don't, because we already know from the beginning, this is our crew. Their minds have been manipulated. Okay, we're already on board. The question is just, how are they going to get out of it, and how do they navigate the lives they have now? How do they reclaim who they were? So to have a reveal like that is not helpful. It actually would have been better if you just slowly, systematically added up the layers to flesh out the story.
Yeah, and no slight against Donnie Most. I just don't think that he was the right actor.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
For the doctor, for Caden. Larry Drake, I know he played the controller in Critical Care, but
oh man,
when you bring a Larry Drake into an episode like this, he brings that his reputation of characters precedes themselves. Yeah. And it allows for an immediate shorthand to be understood about this character.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to create the exposition then in order to frame this character a certain way or cast aspersion on him, because he's the bad guy. He's always the bad guy, except for LA Law, right? Yeah. So,
yeah,
I think that all of the surface level morals, meanings, and messages we've discussed, the crew has found a way to be able to look through all of their differences because they have been their commonality has been buried through the programming, and still were able to come together and rise above their situation and reclaim their identities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all very route. Doesn't make it bad, right? It just doesn't make it extraordinary. And sometimes it doesn't need to be extraordinary. Again, vanilla is not bad when it's told well. It just needed to have a little bit more something, a little bit more, accoutrement.
We always need a little more accoutrement. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Human Error.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Tom Kozak, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, and Paul Shadwell. If you add one letter to the title of this episode, it changes the story completely. Here's an example: Twerk Force. You're very welcome. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.